fever, cough, congestion. When the symptoms keep coming, but you've got to keep going, you can rely on Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One. Just one dose of Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One relieves up to 9 cold and flu symptoms, helping you get on with your day. Need cold and flu relief? Get Mucinex Fast Max All-in-One and Done Relief. It's comeback season. Use as directed.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I am going to talk about the top female fantasies, 4 top female fantasies. This is something that guys are very curious about, and other women are curious about it too, if they are, if they're in the mainstream for their sexual fantasies, because people don't really talk about it that much. Before that, please do subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was a huge red flag is never having sexual encounters or orgasms twice in a row. And by the way, that doesn't mean that everybody who has a refractory period is messed up. I'm talking about throughout the course of your relationship. Of course, people have refractory periods. All right, so anywho, and of course, there's loads and loads, 180 other subscriber episodes for only $8.99 a month if you subscribe. Okay, so the number one, and I've talked about this so much, is that women fantasize about being dominated. Now, that does not mean they want to be sexually assaulted. This is consensual non-consent. And for some, it's not even consensual non-consent. It's just literally the guy acting more aggressive in bed. Now, of course, if you are engaging in any play like this, then you ought to have a safe word. And sometimes people just use safe word as their safe word. Safe word means that you stop all of the sexual activity immediately so that somebody could say, no, don't do that, but they're playing. It's like a fantasy of you saying no and the partner still trying to have sex with you, but then if you said safe word, then everything just stops. And so according to a survey of more than 1,000 people in the Journal of Sexual Medicine, nearly 65% of women fantasize about being dominated sexually. Right? And so this BDSM, which is bondage, domination, sadomasochism, I believe. Either way, the BDSM fantasies are big because you don't have to be in control, right? So you know how your wife doesn't like picking what's for dinner? Well, she also doesn't like picking how sex has to go every single time. And you may say, but she hates anything that I suggest, and it actually does have to go exactly the same every single time. Yes, well, a couple things for that. A, in the fantasy, like, not for nothing, it's not you. I mean, I hope you were sitting down, but it's usually just some faceless guy, or it's like the protagonist of whatever romance novel she's in. And if this stuff like really bothers you, you got to go back to my stuff on fantasies and how people are allowed to have internal thoughts. And if you try to mind erase your wife and get upset about the very idea of her thinking about somebody that's not you, then what she's going to do is what the women raised sex negative do, which is just try to like turn off their sexual desire completely so that they don't end up having any bad thoughts. And this thought police idea is big in dystopian novels because it is a dystopian thing, right? I mean, you do not want to say that it is, quote, bad for your wife to have a sexual thought that isn't about you. Because her body, evolutionarily, as you know from listening to this podcast, her body wants to mate with new people just like yours does. So it would be as absurd, for you to think she should never think about anybody that isn't you as it would be for her to say you should never find another woman attractive. And if you do, that means you don't find her attractive, right? So anyway, so this being dominated thing, it's like she doesn't want to pick what's for dinner. She doesn't want to pick, how to have sex. The reason that you only have sex a certain way is probably because it only works that way. But if you want to add some bells and whistles that aren't technical, so it doesn't have to be literally tying her up. You could say more aggressive things. You could command her to do things, and instead of like asking her that whole like, is this okay? Is this okay? Does this hurt? Does this hurt? Does this hurt? That stuff isn't usually a turn on. Women complain about that stuff a lot. Of course, you should get consent, but by the time that we're talking about asking over and over and over, usually her sexual desire is just, died on the vine because you can't ask that many anxious questions and still have a woman into you, and feel sexual. So the fantasy about being dominated is the idea that you don't have to make any decisions. Somebody wants you so bad and they're so turned on by you that they're just going to take you against your will. Now, remember, these are just power dynamics that are erotic. They're not what she really wants. She doesn't want you to say, this is how we're going to do preschool pickup, like that's not what she wants. She would want you to assert dominance in the sexual context. And of course, that's hard if she's always, wanting you to be more passive in other contexts. And that's why there's couples counseling, because, for the women who are listening, you can't get a guy who acts dominant in the bedroom, but is a, real passive guy and goes along with literally everything you say the rest of the time. Because when you try to get those kind of guys to be dominant in the bedroom, you know that they're just doing it because you ask them to. And that also doesn't seem to work for my female clients. So really the thing to work on may be micromanagement of your husband and not letting him have an independent thought, which of course he's totally cool with because he has low self-esteem and he thinks his thoughts aren't that great anyway. So it's a dually created phenomenon, and it really sucks in the bedroom then because you're trying to have some power dynamics when everybody knows that you, the woman, make 1,000% of the decisions, All right, moving on. So the next one is having sex with other women. So this is kind of a taboo, and it's a turn on. 59% of women in one study fantasized about sex with other women. And, it's an erotic idea. Women are very gender fluid, in more so than men. Research has shown that women's bodies, even when they say they're not turned on, their bodies respond to woman-on-woman porn, as well as bonobo with bonobo, which are both monkeys, as well as man with man, as well as man with woman. Whereas heterosexual men tend to respond to woman-on-woman and man with woman, and not the other ones. So, and homosexual men are man with man, So men are kind of more, they're less gender fluid. Women are more able to get pleasure from anybody and to get turned on by anything. And certainly the idea of being with a woman is taboo and therefore exciting for many women. Of course, other women are with other women, so it's not taboo for them. But this is talking about heterosexual women thinking about being with other women, not homosexual women who are with other women. All right, enjoying sex in public is a big one. So this is like, the idea of having sex on the beach, having sex and, anywhere where you could get caught. The idea is somewhat of an exhibitionist idea, that somebody's going to see you and get turned on by you having sex, and therefore this is just classic exhibitionist voyeur stuff. And so for somebody who's always been thinking that they're just a good girl and a good person and all of this is the idea, again, of the taboo of being bad. And so that is erotic. So hopefully you're getting from this that women's fantasy life is kind of what they think is like bad or what they wouldn't really do in real life. And that's why it's a fantasy, and this is 57% of women. And the other one that is 89% of women surveyed for this book, Tell Me What You Want, which is a book about fantasies by Justin Lemiller, is having a threesome. 89% of people focus on that, and 57% of women, and so threesomes, obviously, it's kind of obviously taboo. It's an erotic idea. It's just having more pleasure. Many people are taught, especially as children, to deny themselves pleasure. The idea of having more than one partner just feels over the top and very focused on physical pleasure. Only. There's no other reason for it. It's not like more efficient. I mean, I guess it could be. But the point is that this is like the opposite of kind of denying yourself. This is just profligate. It's just doing whatever, just hedonistic. And so, and also within it are the other one that women fantasize about, which is being with a woman. If it's two women and a man, but if it's two men and a woman, then you could see how it's just over the top pleasure. And if it's two men and a woman, that's in the fantasy. Now, remember, most people do not want to move on this. They do not want the threesome to actually be something they do, but it's just a fantasy. And if a woman fantasizes about two men, as I've taught you so many times, her body wants to sleep with other men, just as your body wants to sleep with other women, which is why you like MFF or FFM, whatever. But the point is that she then, it's in the context where you approve because you're there, So like, it's the idea of having sex with another man, but in a socially condoned way, in a way that's condoned by the partner. And, some men are intimidated by that idea, but a hell of a lot more find it erotic, which is why, hot wife is like one of the biggest porn, the consumption categories, because a lot of guys are into that idea. Again, into the idea. Most of them don't actually want their wife to sleep with another guy. All right, so what do you do then with these fantasies? How do they actually relate? Well, people really do get scared to share their fantasies with their partner because they think that they're going to be judged. And if you're the sort of person who does get insecure, if you're the preoccupied attachment partner, you probably shouldn't talk about fantasies, right? Because if she says that she thinks frequently about two guys and her having sex, then you're not going to like that, right? So get through like a few months of fucking years of therapy before you even broach that conversation. But like, let's say this would be usual, that she doesn't actually want to do that, but it's just something she thinks about. Why would it be beneficial to talk about it? Because it's erotic, because then you know each other deeply. You can talk about it. You can actually talk about the fantasy without making it a reality. And that's erotic, dirty talk, and that can be very much a turn on, and that can really enhance your sexual experience instead of it just being the same old thing all the time. You may have to physiologically do the same things to your wife to get her to have an orgasm, but you can talk about other things. You can talk about other ideas, or this like having sex outside. She probably doesn't actually want to have sex outside. Maybe she does. But if there's an exhibitionist streak, then, for example, she could wear sexy clothes when you guys go out, and then you would know that other men are looking at her, and then you could say that other people are looking at her. And then that would be erotic for somebody with an exhibitionist streak. Again, though, and this is the case for all of these, if you are like really insecure and you have really anxious attachment and you are jealous and controlling, then, your sex life's probably going to suck, because you can't talk about these sorts of things. And that's why a lot of preoccupied attachment guys get into therapy and they tell me their sex life is bad. Then when we try to talk about things like possible, different things you could try, they get their feelings hurt. And then, they are really defensive. And I have podcasts on how to get genuine sexual feedback from your wife. And the main thing is being non-defensive, confident, and open-minded. Whatever she thinks about, she's with you. And if you could get to a place where you're genuinely curious about what she thinks about, then you will be closer definitionally, because you're sharing your innermost thoughts that you don't share with other people. Now, some women don't have fantasies, particularly if they're lower libido and or they just have a sexual blueprint, so they're just turned on literally by genitals and you're having sex and then that's it. And so don't push her. If she says she has no fantasies, like I have a podcast on this, why your wife has no sexual fantasies or none, she will tell you. And there's the possibility that you're too defensive to receive, for her to feel that you could receive any of these fantasies without completely imploding. And, the other possibility, she has none. And a lot of women don't if they're lower libido. And you could go to that specific podcast to kind of determine which ones you think it is. So, and if you're a woman listening to this, then if those are your fantasies, then you can, or if you have other fantasies, you can try to share them. Now, if your husband is frequently jealous, controlling, and is going to have a problem, well, then it's probably not going to go that well. But then again, your marriage probably isn't going that well. So you should probably get into couples counseling instead of constantly telling yourself, I can't say this, I can't say this, I can't say that. That walking on eggshells shit is from your childhood and you know it. And so you should get into therapy so that for the rest of your life, you don't have to be scared that if you say to him, oh, it would be hot to sleep with a woman. He's like, are you secretly a lesbian? Do you not love me? Are you going to break up with me? Are you going to divorce me? So really, you owe it to yourself to be able to speak freely to your partner. And by the way, a lot of people with really good sex lives do talk about this stuff because there's some of you, And some people on the internet, on the comments say, oh no, nobody could ever talk about fantasies with a spouse. You feel like that if you were raised in a super sex negative home where feelings were not discussed and people didn't really go very deep, talking about anything. Then you feel like it's like just crazy that anybody would talk about fantasies and it must not be real. But it's real. All right, and again, if you need ever a couples therapist or a coach, or you want to work with our sexologist, Heather, reach out. Best Life Behavioral Health is my group practice. Hopefully you guys got some interesting information from this podcast today, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day, guys.